You're tuned in to 22 Crime, where the truth hides in the details. Together, we dive into the darkest corners of human nature, exploring the mysteries that have left investigators puzzled and families searching for justice. Because in the world of crime, the truth is never as simple as it seems. With just 22 minutes on the clock, let's dive into today's case and uncover the shocking truth. Today, we're uncovering a story of courage, resilience, and activism in the face of extraordinary adversity. Marielle Franco, an Afro-Brazilian woman born in the Maré Favela, shattered expectations and broke boundaries, becoming a beacon of hope for many who felt marginalized and forgotten by Brazil's power structures. Marielle wasn't just any politician. She was a black, queer woman standing up for Rio de Janeiro's most vulnerable communities, those whose daily lives were plagued by violence, poverty, and systemic oppression. A fierce advocate for human rights, Franco spoke out against police brutality, corruption, and injustice with a fearlessness that earned her admiration, but also powerful enemies. But on March 14, 2018, this rising political star was silenced in a brutal assassination, leaving the world to ask, who would kill Marielle Franco, and why? In today's episode, we'll explore Marielle's journey, the explosive political landscape she navigated, and the powerful impact she left behind. Join us as we delve into Marielle Franco's life, legacy, and the chilling questions surrounding her death. The clock is ticking. Let's uncover the truth behind today's mystery. Viewer discretion is advised. 22 is a true crime podcast that delves into real-life crime stories, which often involve graphic descriptions, sensitive content, and strong language that may not be suitable for all audiences. We strive to present these cases with the utmost respect for the victims and their families. Please note that the content discussed may be distressing or triggering for some listeners. Additionally, all resources and information presented in this podcast are obtained from publicly available internet sources. Listener discretion is strongly advised, and we recommend that only mature audiences proceed with caution. If you are sensitive to such content, please consider watching another video. Stay safe and take care of your mental health. Born on July 27, 1979, Marielle Francisco da Silva, known to the world as Marielle Franco, was raised in one of the most challenging areas of Rio de Janeiro, the Maré Favela. This sprawling community was a world of contrasts, tight-knit families and lively traditions alongside the hardships of poverty and violence. In Maré, life was often dictated by powerful gangs and paramilitary forces fighting for control, and these battles left residents like Marielle and her family in the crossfire. From an early age, Marielle knew fear. She'd wake to gunfire echoing through the night, and her walks to school were marked by the grim sight of bodies on the streets. There were days her parents would tell her to stay home because shootouts had closed the roads. But these sights and sounds, although painful, began to ignite a fire in her, a determination to not only survive but to change the conditions she saw around her. Though Marielle's family struggled to make ends meet, they shared a steadfast belief in the power of education. By age 11, Marielle was working to help pay for school, taking on odd jobs to buy the materials she needed. She'd study by candlelight and take extra classes on weekends, hoping that her education might eventually pave a way out of the relentless poverty that seemed to grip her community. And with each lesson, each book she managed to afford, her desire to make a difference grew stronger. By the time she reached her late teens, Marielle had become a mother. At just 19, she gave birth to her only daughter, Luyara. This moment brought new challenges and responsibilities, but also a renewed sense of purpose. She was determined to carve a path forward, not just for herself but for her daughter, who she dreamed would inherit a more just world. To further her goals, Marielle enrolled in a free college prep program offered by the Maré Center for Studies and Solidarity Action, a local initiative designed to give young people from favelas a chance to pursue higher education. Her talent and dedication shone through, and soon Marielle received a scholarship to the prestigious Catholic University of Rio de Janeiro. This achievement was monumental, not just for Marielle but for her entire community, who saw her as a symbol of hope. She had not only risen above the expectations set for her as a young black woman from a favela but had also broken through barriers in spaces where she was one of the only black students among a sea of white faces. Marielle's time at the university was both rewarding and grueling. She juggled her studies with raising her daughter, working as a preschool teacher to make ends meet, all while taking on the discrimination and isolation she faced as a Black woman in a predominantly white and wealthy institution. It was during these years that she lost one of her closest friends to the very violence she'd witnessed as a child. A stray bullet in a police shootout took her friend's life. This loss shifted something in Marielle. She wasn't content to simply escape her circumstances anymore. She was driven to become a voice for her community. In the years that followed, Marielle immersed herself in human rights work, focusing on fighting police brutality and advocating for those whose voices had long been ignored. She earned her master's degree in public administration, her knowledge and dedication growing with each step. And though Marielle had carved a path from Maré to the halls of academia, her motivations were rooted firmly in the struggles of the community that had raised her. She carried their stories, their pain, and their hope with her everywhere. As her reputation grew, Marielle took on a new ambition: to run for office. She wasn't just driven by personal goals but by a mission to stand up for the people of the favelas, to hold powerful institutions accountable, and to challenge the systems that perpetuated inequality. For Marielle, politics wasn't a career, it was an urgent calling, a chance to transform her community's suffering into meaningful change. For Marielle, her life had always been about survival, but after the loss of a close friend to a stray bullet, that focus transformed. That single event, the death of someone she loved at the hands of indiscriminate violence, turned her grief into a fierce resolve. Marielle's gaze shifted from escaping poverty to fighting the very systems that perpetuated it. In this moment, her path toward human rights activism became crystal clear. She would not only speak for her community but also challenge the institutions that allowed violence to persist. Driven by this newfound purpose, Marielle began working with human rights organizations, where she brought her knowledge, passion, and first-hand experience. Her work centered on the urgent issues of police brutality and the abuses of power she saw affecting Rio's most vulnerable. She collaborated with Marcelo Freixo, another outspoken advocate in the Brazilian legislature, who shared her mission to hold the powerful accountable. Working alongside Freixo, Marielle honed her skills, becoming a tireless advocate for justice. She delved deep into cases of abuse in the favelas, championed for those who had lost family members to violent policing, and became a steadfast defender of marginalized communities. The injustice she witnessed only strengthened her conviction, and it wasn't long before Marielle saw a way to make an even bigger impact. She realized that true change would require someone within the system fighting for her community. With her community's support, Marielle ran for a seat on the Rio de Janeiro City Council in 2016. Her campaign was groundbreaking. She wasn't just running as a candidate but as a Black, queer woman from the favelas, a symbol of hope for many and a threat to others. Her platform was bold. She championed human rights, supported LGBTQ+ rights, fought for the rights of women, and called for accountability from law enforcement, all issues that had long been overlooked in Brazilian politics. Her campaign resonated deeply, and Marielle didn't just win. She was elected with the 5th highest number of votes among more than 1,500 candidates. Her election was a powerful statement, a victory for those who felt unseen and unheard. On the council, she became the chair of the Women's Defense Commission, where she continued her fearless advocacy for those who had suffered violence and inequality. Marielle used her new position to raise awareness and demand change. She was vocal, unyielding, and unapologetic, speaking out against the systemic violence inflicted upon the poor and Black communities. She brought to the council chambers the voices of those who had never set foot there, amplifying their struggles, their hopes, and their demands for justice. Through her work, Marielle Franco was more than just a politician. She became a symbol of resilience, an unbreakable force challenging Brazil's most ingrained structures of power. And for those who benefited from those structures, she became a formidable opponent. Marielle Franco's work as a city councilor was defined by one of Brazil's most pressing and polarizing issues, the militarized policing of favelas. In the years leading up to her political career, Rio de Janeiro's security policies increasingly involved heavy-handed military intervention, particularly in poorer neighborhoods like Marielle's childhood home, Maré. Under these policies, Brazil's favelas were often treated as war zones, and the people living there were caught in the crossfire between law enforcement and gang violence. The police entered these areas with armored vehicles, weapons drawn, and the authority to treat residents as potential threats. For Marielle, The impacts of this militarized policing weren't theoretical. They were a part of her lived experience. She had watched her friends, neighbors, and family members live in fear of the very people sworn to protect them. She had seen the toll of police shootings on young lives and the trauma left in their wake. Marielle believed that this approach not only failed to solve Rio's problems with violence but also made them worse. She argued that militarized policing treated poverty and blackness as crimes in and of themselves, and this led her to challenge the authorities at every turn. As chair of the Women's Defense Commission, Marielle had a platform that she used to shine a light on police violence and the way it disproportionately affected Brazil's Black, poor, and LGBTQ+ communities. She argued that militarization was a band-aid approach that ignored the root causes of violence and crime: poverty, lack of education, and systemic inequality. For Marielle, advocating for her community meant addressing these root causes rather than simply allowing police to crack down on neighborhoods that had already suffered so much. She did not mince words when speaking out against the police. In public statements, she held law enforcement accountable for abuses and extrajudicial killings, which she saw as symptoms of a system that was more focused on suppressing than uplifting. Her boldness in the face of such powerful institutions was a risk, but for Marielle, it was a necessary risk. Her commitment to justice for those who had lost loved ones to police brutality or who had been pushed to the margins of society drove her to continue her fight, even in the face of threats and opposition. Marielle also fiercely defended the rights of women and LGBTQ+ individuals, groups often overlooked in political conversations but deeply affected by the violence and corruption she fought against. She believed that true security could only be achieved when society's most vulnerable members were safe and respected. By spotlighting these issues, she aimed to break down the structures that perpetuated violence, showing that Brazil's path to true peace lay in equity, not oppression. In challenging the police, Marielle became a voice of hope and defiance for those who saw the government as an adversary rather than an ally. Her relentless push for reform made her a powerful ally to Brazil's marginalized communities and an influential advocate for a reimagined approach to public safety, one that would protect rather than persecute. March 14, 2018, was supposed to be a regular evening for Marielle Franco, but fate had other plans. That night, she attended a roundtable event titled Young Black Women Moving Power Structures, where she spoke passionately to a group of women, encouraging them to take up space, seek justice, and defy the limits that society placed upon them. Her message was inspiring, a call to action for a more just, inclusive society. As she concluded her speech, her words seemed to hang in the air, powerful, urgent, and resolute. Around 9:30 p.m., Marielle left the event with her driver, Anderson Pedro Gomez, and her press officer, Fernanda Chavez. They climbed into a car that would take them back to Marielle's neighborhood, but they didn't realize someone was following them. The streets were dark, quiet, and seemingly empty as they drove through the Estacio neighborhood in central Rio. But soon, an unmarked car pulled alongside theirs. Within moments, gunshots rang out, shattering the silence of the night. The shots were precise. In a calculated attack, 4 bullets struck Marielle, hitting her in the head and neck, while Anderson, seated at the wheel, was also fatally shot. Fernanda, seated in the back seat, managed to survive with minor injuries, emerging as the sole witness to the assassination. Investigators would later note that the killers knew exactly where to aim. They used a silencer, leaving no time for escape or response. The attack was over within seconds, but its effects would last a lifetime. The news of Marielle's death sent shockwaves through Rio and beyond. This wasn't a random act of violence. It bore all the marks of a planned assassination. There were too many specific details. The shooters knew Marielle's route, her location in the car, and her schedule. The bullets used in the assassination were reportedly part of a batch bought by the federal police over a decade earlier, raising serious questions about the involvement of law enforcement or other powerful figures in her death. As the investigation unfolded, suspicions grew. 2 former police officers were eventually arrested in connection to the crime, but the question of who ordered Marielle's killing, and why, remained unanswered. Was it her unflinching activism that made her a target, her outspoken criticism of police violence and corruption, or perhaps her influence as a Black, queer woman in a sphere traditionally dominated by powerful, conservative men? The assassination left a deep scar on Brazilian society, and the shadow of unanswered questions continues to haunt those who seek justice. This wasn't just a murder. It was an attempt to silence a voice for the voiceless, a leader who dared to challenge the status quo. Marielle's killing became a stark reminder of the danger that activists and marginalized voices face, especially when they stand up against forces that thrive in the dark. The investigation into Marielle Franco's assassination was swift yet clouded with suspicion, controversy, and public skepticism from the very start. Given Marielle's fierce criticism of Brazil's police force and her vocal stance against police violence, many immediately questioned the involvement of law enforcement in her murder. This suspicion only grew when forensic experts traced the bullets used in the attack back to a batch purchased by Brazil's federal police in 2006. While officials claimed that the bullets had been stolen years prior, this revelation raised more questions than answers. The investigation quickly became a focal point of national interest and tension. Despite promises from authorities to deliver justice, skepticism lingered. How could the same police force she had challenged now be trusted to seek accountability in her death? To the public, the investigation seemed tainted by the very forces Marielle had sought to expose. And this mistrust only deepened as allegations of a cover-up circulated. 1 year after the murder, 2 former police officers, Rony Lessa and Elcio de Queiroz, were arrested and charged in connection with the killing. Rony Lessa, a retired military police officer, was accused of being the shooter, while Elcio de Queiroz, an ex-police officer, was allegedly the driver. The arrests provided some answers, but the investigation remained incomplete, as neither suspect had any apparent personal motive to kill Marielle. This pointed to a larger conspiracy. Someone powerful must have ordered the hit, but who? Several theories emerged about possible motives. Some believed that Marielle was targeted due to her unyielding activism against police corruption and brutality. Her outspoken opposition to Rio's militarized security policies and her investigations into police misconduct made her a significant threat to those who profited from or were protected by Brazil's entrenched systems of power. Another theory suggested that powerful political or paramilitary figures, possibly linked to Rio's notorious militias, might have orchestrated her murder as a means of silencing her relentless pursuit of justice for favela residents. One prominent theory speculated that the militias, shadowy paramilitary groups largely composed of former or off-duty police officers, played a key role in Marielle's death. These groups wield significant control over entire neighborhoods, operating as both protectors and extortionists. Marielle's advocacy for human rights and her challenge to police involvement in such militias had certainly made her a target in their eyes. For the militias, eliminating Marielle could have been a way to preserve their power and intimidate others who dared to question their influence. As the investigation unfolded, new details came to light that implicated influential political figures, even suggesting ties between the suspects and prominent politicians. Connections between the suspects and high-ranking officials, including individuals close to the current administration, fueled rumors of a wider conspiracy to protect the true orchestrators of Marielle's assassination. The political landscape was already polarized, and her murder seemed to reveal the ugly nexus of violence, corruption, and politics in Brazil. For the public, the investigation became emblematic of a broken system. Despite the arrests, the case remains shrouded in mystery, with key questions unanswered. Who ordered Marielle's assassination? What threat did her work pose that justified such a brutal, calculated attack? And could justice ever truly be achieved when so many forces seemed invested in silencing her? Marielle's death may have been intended to suppress her voice, but it had the opposite effect. Her assassination ignited a movement, and her supporters refused to let her legacy be erased. They demanded answers and, above all, accountability, holding vigils, marches, and rallies around the world. Marielle's story and the ongoing search for justice continue to expose the complexities, corruption, and challenges within Brazil's justice system and the societal divides she dedicated her life to bridging. As we close the story of Marielle Franco, it's impossible not to feel the weight of her legacy, a woman who rose from the favelas, battled against oppression, and devoted her life to those often left voiceless. Marielle's journey is a powerful reminder of the courage it takes to stand up to systemic injustice and the resilience needed to demand change, even when the stakes are high. But her story doesn't end with her tragic death. Marielle's fight lives on through the people she inspired, through movements that push back against oppression, and through each voice that refuses to be silenced. Her assassination may have been an attempt to erase her impact, but instead, it ignited a movement, a commitment to justice, equality, and human rights that continues to grow. We encourage you, our listeners, to honor Marielle's memory by carrying forward her mission. Stand up for those who face injustice. Raise your voice when others are silenced. Each of us has a role to play in building a more inclusive and just world. Thank you so much for listening all the way through. If you've made it to this point, drop a comment with the word "done," and we'll give you a personal shout-out to show our appreciation. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive in this murder and media frenzy. It was as fascinating for us to create as we hope it was for you to hear. If you found this episode thought-provoking, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. We also invite you to join our YouTube channel, where you can get early access to our content, have your questions answered directly, and enjoy exclusive members-only content. We'd love to know what you think about this case. Was justice truly served? Share your opinions in the comments below. We're always eager to hear your thoughts. For those wanting to explore more on true crime, we've included Amazon affiliate links to some of the books we referenced in our researches. Purchasing through the link won't cost you anything extra, but it will support the channel and help us continue bringing you more content. If you're craving even more, consider joining our Patreon community. As a member, you'll get access to the full script of this episode, exclusive book summaries, and even the complete set of images featured in this case, available for purchase in our Patreon store. This has been 22 Crime. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.